Điều trị phải dùng một khoản lớn.
Auntie, things are really tough lately. Can you help me out?
Here, take this. Be careful.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. With trembling hands and a breaking heart, Tu Diem makes a decision that will change everything. She borrows $10,000 from Tu's mother, not for herself, not for comfort, but to fight for Tuan's fading memories. Every dollar carries her fear, her love, and her silent prayer that it won't be too late. Tuan's dementia is stealing him piece by piece, and time is no longer on their side. As Tu Diem shoulders a debt far heavier than money, she asks herself one painful question. How much must a woman sacrifice to save the man she loves? Because when love faces loss, it is measured not in words, but in everything one is willing to give. Hope is often spoken of as something light, a feeling, a belief, a quiet prayer. But for Tu Diem, hope had a number attached to it. $10,000. The doctor's voice was calm, almost rehearsed, as he explained the new treatment. It could slow the progression of Tuan's dementia. It could give him more time to remember, time to stay present, time to remain himself just a little longer. But it was expensive, and it had to begin soon. Tu Diem nodded as if she understood everything. In truth, her mind stopped at one sentence. Payment must be made in advance. That evening, she sat alone on the hospital bench, staring at her phone. Her savings were gone, drained by tests, medication, endless hospital bills. She thought about the future she had quietly abandoned, new clothes, small dreams, even rest. None of it mattered now. Inside the room, Tuan slept, his face peaceful, unaware of the battle being fought outside his mind. Earlier that day, he had looked at her and asked, "Why do you always look tired?" She had smiled and said, "Because I don't sleep enough." She did not tell him the truth. The truth was heavier than exhaustion. It was fear, pure and relentless. Fear that love alone was not enough. Fear that wanting to save someone did not mean you could. As night fell, Tu Diem scrolled through her contacts, each name a door she hesitated to knock on. Friends had already helped in small ways. Family ties were distant and fragile. Then one name stopped her breath. Tu's mother. The woman who had once looked at Tu Diem with polite distance. The woman who believed Tuan's life should have followed a different path, with a different woman by his side. Asking her for money felt like stepping barefoot onto broken glass. Yet what was pride compared to Tuan's fading memories? Tu Diem stood up slowly, her decision heavy but clear. She would borrow the money, she would carry the debt, financial and emotional, without complaint. Because when love is pushed to its edge, it learns an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes hope is not something you feel. It is something you choose to pay for, no matter the cost. Some doors are not hard to find. They are hard to knock on. The morning Tuan Diem went to see Thu's mother, the sky was unusually clear. The kind of clarity that felt almost cruel, as if the world had no idea how heavy her heart was. She stood in front of the gate for a long moment, adjusting her clothes, rehearsing words that refused to settle. This was not a visit of comfort. It was a request born from desperation. Thu's mother opened the door with a look of mild surprise, followed quickly by restraint. Time had softened her features, but not her pride. She invited Tu Diem inside, offering tea in the polite way people do when they expect distance, not confession. They sat across from each other in silence. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than it should have been. Tu Diem felt her palms grow damp, her throat tighten. Tuan is ill, she began quietly. His dementia is getting worse. Thu's mother listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. Tu Diem continued, each word stripping away a layer of dignity she had carefully built over the years. She spoke of hospital bills, of treatments that might help, of time slipping through her fingers. Then she bowed her head slightly. I want to borrow $10,000. The room felt suddenly smaller. For a moment, Thu's mother said nothing. She sipped her tea slowly, as if tasting the weight of the request. Why me? She asked at last. You know how complicated the past is. Tu Diem nodded. I know, she said, and I wouldn't come if there were another way. The older woman's gaze sharpened. And if Tuan recovers, she said, what then? Will he remember who stood by him, or will he return to the life he once chose? The question cut deeper than any refusal. Tu Diem inhaled slowly. I'm not asking for gratitude, she replied. I'm asking for a chance, for him. Silence stretched again. Outside, a neighbor laughed, a car passed by. Life continued in its careless rhythm. Inside, two women faced each other across years of unspoken tension. Finally, Thu's mother stood up. She walked to another room without a word, leaving Tu Diem alone with her thoughts and her fear. When she returned, she placed an envelope on the table. I'll lend you the money, but remember, this debt is not only financial. Tu Diem bowed her head, tears burning behind her eyes. She understood. Some help comes with conditions, and some sacrifices leave marks no one else can see. Money changes hands quickly. Its weight is felt long after. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as Lytudiep carried it out of Tu's mother's house. $10,000, neatly arranged, silent, unforgiving. Each step away from that door echoed with words left unsaid, with pride bent but not broken. On the bus ride back to the hospital, Tu Diem stared at the passing streets. Vendors shouted, schoolchildren laughed, someone argued loudly on a phone. Ordinary life unfolded without hesitation. It amazed her how the world kept moving, while hers felt paused, balanced on the edge of that envelope in her bag. At the hospital counter, she handed over the money with steady hands. The clerk counted it carefully, professionally. No one asked how long it took to gather. No one asked what it cost her to ask for it. Inside Tuan's room, the machines hummed softly. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, his expression distant. "Did you eat?" he asked when he saw her. "Yes," she lied again, smiling. She sat beside him, holding his hand. His grip tightened instinctively, a small gesture that made her chest ache. He didn't remember their past, but his body remembered safety. That alone felt like a fragile victory. Later, the doctor explained the treatment plan. It wouldn't cure Tuan, only slow the decline. There were no guarantees, only possibilities. Tu Diem nodded, absorbing each word like a contract she had already signed with a fate. That night, alone in the hallway, her strength finally cracked. She leaned against the wall, tears falling freely. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. She had traded her pride, her comfort, her silence, for a chance that might still fail, and yet she did not regret it. She thought of Thu's mother's words. This debt is not only financial. Tu Diem understood now. The real debt was the pressure to succeed, to make the sacrifice mean something, to prove that love could justify such a cost. Back in the room, Tuan reached out when he sensed her presence. "You're here," he said, more statement than question. "Yes," she replied softly. In that moment, Tu Diem realized the truth she had been avoiding. If Tuan recovered, he might never fully understand what she had endured. If he didn't, she would still carry the debt, quietly, alone. Some debts are not meant to be repaid with money. They are carried, day after day, by those who choose to love without certainty. Some mornings arrive quietly, without promise. Others arrive carrying a question. The morning Tu Diem woke up on the hospital bench, her neck stiff and eyes burning from lack of sleep, she did not expect anything to change. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and weak coffee, the same as every other day. Nurses walked past with practiced calm. Life, once again, moved on. Inside the room, Tuan was sitting up. It was a small thing, yet her heart skipped. He wasn't staring at the ceiling. He wasn't lost in that distant silence. He was looking out the window, watching the sunlight spill across the floor as if it mattered. "You're up early," she said softly, careful not to break the moment. He turned toward her. His eyes lingered on her face longer than usual. Not empty, searching. "Have you been sleeping here?" he asked. Tu Diem froze. "Yes," she answered after a breath. "For a while now." He frowned slightly, as if a door in his mind had creaked open just enough to let in air. "I don't remember everything," he said slowly, "but I know this feeling. You've been here before. Not just now, before all of this." Her fingers trembled as she reached for his hand. "It's okay if you don't remember," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The doctor later called it progress. Not recovery, not a miracle, just a gentle return of fragments, a smell that felt familiar, a voice that felt safe, a name that hovered on the edge of his tongue. That afternoon, they walked slowly in the hospital garden. Tuan paused in front of a small patch of flowers. "I think you like these," he said uncertainly. Tu Diem laughed through tears. "You used to pick them for me when we had no money for anything else." He smiled, confused but warm. Then maybe I wasn't completely lost. As the sun dipped lower, Tu Diem felt something shift inside her. The debt was still there, the future was still fragile, nothing had been erased or guaranteed. But hope, real hope, had arrived quietly, like memory knocking softly instead of forcing its way in. And for the first time since she borrowed that money, Tu Diem allowed herself to believe. Love, when patient enough, can teach even memory how to come home.